Chapter 21, verse 7. So they asked him, saying, Teacher, but when will these things be? And what sign will there be when these things are about to take place? So Jesus had just told his disciples that Jerusalem would be destroyed. And being it the highlight of every Jew, all of a sudden it becomes, whoa, time out. When's this going to happen, and what are the signs? I kind of want to know. And so Jesus is going to give them 7 things to watch out for or to keep an eye on that will happen during that time. The first one he lists there in verse 8, and he said to them, Take heed, or be on your guard, be watchful, that you not be deceived. For many will come in my name, saying, I am he, I'm the Messiah. And the time has drawn near. Therefore, do not go after them. So the first indication, he says, you want to be looking for spiritual deception worldwide and believing in false messiahs and truths. And you think, well, how does that happen? How does somebody fall into a falsehood? You find that Jesus said, from the heart proceed evil thoughts, wickedness, adulteries, and things. So sin starts within the heart, and then it works its way out into a society. The moral decline begins to happen. You can note it in Romans chapter 1. You can note it in 2 Timothy chapter 3. In the last days, there will be perilous times, and people will be lovers of themselves and lovers of money, backbiters, haters of God. You'll have evil called good and good called evil. Those homosexual behavior it describes there taking place. These are of a moral declining society taking place. And when you throw out the biblical standards and start to make your own standards in society, you'll find this rapid decline taking place, this downward spiral. It goes like this. First, there starts with a toleration. It's tolerated. That sinful action or lifestyle is tolerated. People say, well, it's none of my business. And then it starts to go into a realm of accepted as okay. Because who am I to say what's right and wrong at that point? People make up their own rules. And then thirdly, it starts to be celebrated as either a lifestyle that started to be flaunted and you take pride in whatever it is. Hey, look what I've done, man. I took out that guy last week and posted it on TikTok. And it becomes one of those things that celebrated the sin that's taking place. And then fourthly, it begins to be defended. It begins to be defended against those who say it's a wrong behavior through either policies or programs or whatever. I'm going to stand and I'm going to defend my right to these things. And lastly, it becomes an aggressive persecution towards those who would have a different opinion, all in the name of my rights. That's why we have such a cancel culture thing taking place. If I can rally enough people to side with me, then I am going to cancel out that person and push them out because they don't agree with me. And that's what's happening. The moral fabric of our society is crumbling apart as a nation. And I think, church, we have to come to grips that America is possibly entering a time of judgment. You see, we want to believe that everything's going to be nice and neat and comfortable, but if God is now saying, I'm giving you over to your sin, what you've wanted all these days and all these years, I'm going to let you reap the consequences of it, then we as a church just kind of hold on and say, okay, Lord, I'll keep my eyes on you. We have to come to grips as a church nationwide, in a sense, church in America, that persecution may come our way. It may happen. I'm not prophesying it will be. I sure hope it doesn't, but I can see it on the horizon. You see, God judged nations in the past. He judged nations in the past. You can read about them all through the Word. Because they rejected him, he judged nations, but he saved sinners. He judged nations. And America is just on that chopping block, we might say. And it's definitely a challenging, difficult time. In fact, it's closer now than ever. I mean, sometimes you look at things and you go, oh, that could happen someday. Remember 15, 20 years ago? It was like, I can see that happening someday. And now you feel like it just knocked on the door and you opened up and went, whoa, stranger danger, right there. We'll talk about a little bit more of that. But it starts with the moral failure. And then secondly, the moral decline in society starts to lead to a spiritual apostasy, a falling away from the faith. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, it talks about before the Antichrist comes on the scene, there will be a great departure from the faith. And we see that happening even in our world. You think about it, how COVID has so shifted us in ways, even as Christianity is. I mean, I'd shared these before, but most churches in America have had huge losses of people who attend that were at the pre-COVID levels. In fact, they had said, Outreach Magazine says that 20% of churches permanently closed due to COVID because of people's attendance, because of finances, whatever it might be, they've had to close down. In fact, Barna, and I shared this before, 1 in 3 practicing Christians has stopped attending any church, in person or online, since COVID started in March. So 33% just unplugged completely. That's kind of crazy. Jesus said in Matthew 24:12, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold, or it will die out, like a fire dying out. And even apart from COVID, we are seeing some interesting things. For a moment, if you were to step back and you were to look at Christians in America, you would find a scary thing taking place. They're falling away from that foundation of the gospel. Everything's becoming social. Everything's becoming political. Christians are more political now than I think they've ever have been. And I want to warn you, and if I could poke you just a little bit, I want you to be careful of what you're posting, because you don't want to be known for your politics. You want to be known for the person of Jesus Christ. Politics will come and go. And as a believer in Jesus Christ, you are called to stand and shine as a light for the gospel. At times you may like things and you might do things, but be very careful that politics don't define who you are, and it becomes all you talk about and all you stand for, and you're poking people in the eyes, because guess what's happening to Christianity in America? They're failing and falling because we're getting sidetracked into side businesses. We're so worried about this person and what they're saying and that viewpoint, we don't rest in the Lord and take his peace in our heart. We're so worried about a post that we haven't spent time to first pray and say, hey, God, should I even put that out there? I have never seen a post change anybody's mind. Maybe to laugh, but I've never seen a post say, man, you know what, you're right. I think I'm going to change parties because of your post. It just stirs up a fire, and it sidetracks, and the enemy just laughs on the side because he knows Christians are not being effective, because they get sidetracked into these things. Christians are becoming more critical of other Christians and viewpoints. You don't like what I have, I'm going to defriend you. And it's like, whoa, time out. Let's come back to what Jesus would do. Jesus said a house divided can't stand, and I wonder if we're becoming a divided church in America because of political and social viewpoints, and the love for Jesus, who he is just fading away. Listen, the tragic downfall of the 21st century American church, if it happens, will not be from an outward persecution. It will be a lack of love and unity in Jesus towards one another. I firmly believe that. Why? Because when persecution ever happened to the church, it always fueled the church rather than burned it out. Look at church history. The church in the first century was underneath Nero, the worst Roman Caesar. He's burning Christians in his garden, and he burned Rome down and blamed it on the Christians just so he could persecute them. I mean, that's how bad it was. And where's their focus? Their focus was on Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So the sin in the heart leads to this moral decline in society, leads to a spiritual apostasy, and ultimately it will lead to a one-world religion where all faiths are united and humanism is the goal. Let me show you just a couple things of what's going on in our world. This is from the Catholic News Agency. The Pope had signed, this is February 4th, 2019. The Pope signed a declaration of universal peace between Catholicism and Islam, taking place. October 21st of 2020, the BBC, Pope Francis indicates his support for civil unions for same-sex couples. This is a major step forward for the Catholic Church. You see these things coming into place. I think we're on the brink of an incredible spiritual deception, but it's all falling in place as the Word of God says. Look at verse 9 here. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified, for these things must come to pass first, but the end will not come immediately. So the commotions is instability, confusion, disorder. And we can look at our world and we think, okay, in the past 100 years or so, we've seen major world wars occur. There's tension in the Middle East. There's China. There's Russia. There's all these things happening, and it's just it's like a bomb about to explode. We see those things happening. We see in our past 100 years or so the nuclear weapons, and those have even expounded. And I found this one. I want to show you two different pictures. This is the Russian Avangard missile, and it's a hypersonic weapon that they've created. The second one, they take this missile and they put it on, do the next picture, they put it on what's called a hypersonic glide. Now this puppy goes 27 times faster than the speed of sound. 21,000 miles per hour. That's fast. And it has this ability to make sharp maneuvers in the atmosphere, making it hard to intercept. Unlike a ballistic missile, when they shoot it, it goes this way, and people go, oh, okay, I can project it and throw something up. This puppy goes this way. See, he'll track me now. And America has no defense against it. You put an EMT on that weapon, and it could take out grids and communications instantly here in our country. And we've seen even in our world, cyber attacks can happen and take down all kinds of things, and you don't even have to set foot in a foreign land. We see these things taking place. August 15th, 2020, an article about the Chinese military experts urging Beijing to prepare for war with the U.S. Crazy stuff. But nations are not just described as the boundaries that we put in place. The Greek word for nations is the word ethnos, where we get our word ethnics, or ethnicities. Race against race will be taking place. And haven't we seen that this year or last year more than ever before? It seemed like it came to just right up to the forefront. Blacks against whites and this, that, and the other. Everybody's this racial tension. It's crazy in our land. And Jesus said, nation against nation, race against race, kingdom against kingdom is actually, it's the word basaninia, and it's a rule, a realm, or a dominion, not to be confused with an actual kingdom, but rather the right or authority to rule over a kingdom. In other words, it's idea against idea. Conservative versus liberal. And the war goes on. To the point of where we even get to a place of not considering humanity as a baseline. You remember when, it still happens. It just blows my mind. If somebody gets COVID or something like that, and somebody will treat, man, I hope they die from it. Really? Have we gotten to that place as a society? Yes, we have. Scary, scary. But this is the reality of what's happening, the wars against nations and kingdoms. Look at verse 12. But before all these things, they will lay their hand on you and persecute you, delivering you up to synagogues and prisons. You will be brought, did I miss it? You'll be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. But it will turn out for you as an occasion for testimony. Therefore, settle it in your hearts not to meditate beforehand on what you will answer. For I will give you a mouth of wisdom, which all your adversaries will not be able to contradict or resist. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But not a hair of your head shall be lost. By your patience possess your souls. So we see not only is the wars taking place, but you find that there is a global persecution of Christians. It says, before synagogues, which would be the religious leaders, will come against the true believers. They will deliver you up to prisons. Speaking of a governmental verdict, a sentence upon your faith. The persecution comes from both religious and the world. There are more Christians who have died for their faith in the 20th century than all the other centuries combined. But what we're seeing in the 21st century is almost a world genocide of believers taking place. January 14th, 2021, Open Doors, this is just a few weeks ago, posted that the number of Christians murdered for faith rose 60% in 2020. 1 in 8 Christians worldwide suffer for their faith. This past week, I read an article just a few days ago about 750 church members in Ethiopia that were killed by the government in front of their church. October 16th, 2020, Christians being warned not to display a Bible in Saudi Arabia in public because it's getting heated. And we're even seeing it here in America, aren't we, in some degree? I mean, take our head out of the sand. You see, there is this persecution against Christians in biblical principles unlike any before. We've seen flower shops being sued and bakers being sued, and now we're at a place where the censoring of any conservative voice, many bent on just throwing out God and biblical principles from a society. In fact, if you read, and you can read President Biden's equality plan on joebiden.com, and you find some really scary stuff for Christians, I'll tell you. Really scary stuff in a sense of what's in it. It threatens a Christian's freedom to not support LGBTQ2 plus ideas and agendas. It's going to get a little difficult. So Christian church, buckle up, But here's what I know. Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Jesus said that he's got his hand on this, and he's in control always, and I don't have to fear. Jesus is in charge. We find another aspect taking place in our world, and that is the natural disasters start increasing. As Jesus talked about, I think, in Matthew. The natural disasters increasing, the pestilences and plagues and famines abounding. And, we see COVID-19 and what it's done. It's caused starvation worldwide. Tens of thousands of kids are starving to death. We look at our world death count from COVID, that's over 2 million. In the U.S., 92% of COVID deaths are over 55, and it really is a fearful sight. And now we're at a place of, well, what do we do as a society? We have a vaccination push for be vaccinated. And I would just tell you this. There are some people that have concerns about that whole thing. There is concerns on first, is there any long-term side effects with this thing? There is concerns on, okay, now I just read about a super spreader out of UK that's supposedly 30% more are dying from it. Am I going to have to get shots every single year on this or more shots? Is this really going to work? And there's the great concern is what happens if I don't take this shot? Are you going to take away my freedoms and my abilities? I mean, hey, all of a sudden I can't travel without it. I can't do this without it. I mean, don't I have a right to say, to take it or not? But church, be careful of this. Be careful of allowing it to divide you and distract you from the love of Christ. God said in his word in Colossians 3, your life is hidden with Christ in God. Whether you take a vaccination or not is not going to do anything with eternity or your faith. It doesn't mean you're not a Christian if you take it or don't take it. It's between you and God. It's your choice. If you choose to take it, we want to love you as if you didn't take it. If you don't take it, we're going to love you as if you did. Let me balance that out. See what I'm saying? Is all this stuff is definitely causing a lot of problems. September 16th of 2020, MSNBC found that 60%, and we'll show this up there, 60% of businesses closed from COVID are permanent closures. You see it. Some of you have lost that. You've seen it firsthand. And many world leaders are talking about what's called the Great Reset from COVID. It comes from the World Economic Forum. It basically is a start over in caring for the planet, the climate change, and organizing humanity, transforming societies, and dealing with inequalities, changing economics, making everything just one, making it new. Let me give you another one. John Kerry, December 3rd, 2020, who actually is Biden's special presidential envoy for climate change. He says this, the Great Reset will happen at a greater speed and intensity than people imagine. COVID was a big moment that opened the door for the Great Reset. And like any politicians, you can't let a good crisis go to waste, right? And all the instability of the world, even right now in our day. We can see how a one world currency could come into effect as well. You go in to buy something and they say you don't have any coins, please use your card and stuff like that. And you slowly get kind of groomed towards that. But that's nothing new according to the Bible. It talked about it taking place. August 15, 2020, the feds develop an experimental digital currency. October 2nd of 2020, Europe's central bank moves towards introducing a digital euro. ING Banking of October 2020 said this: digital currency will be a more likely option post-COVID-19. The bigger role of governments and the close cooperation between them and the financial sector in combating the economic fallout will guide discussion. So the role of government will have a bigger hand in controlling things with the central banking system due to the economic crisis in place. That's a crisis too. The light goes out, the party's over, right? We can turn it back on now. There we are. So, but those things taking place. You look at the stimulus checks, and you look at all the stuff for free that's being put out. And on one hand, yeah, I understand, help, but come on, some of it is just overboard. Give me free college. Let's pay off all our student loans. Give me all that free. All it is grooming people to rely, I believe, upon the government to fix all the solutions. You realize this, that we, according to usdebt.org, are $28 trillion in debt. $225,000 per taxpayer. Not per household, per taxpayer. And eventually a nation implodes from the debt weight because they can't bear it. And there has to be a different system in place. Let me tell you what's going on in China. China, I love the land, I must tell you. I love the land and I love the people, having been there and connected to them the rest of my life, really, with my own kids. But China, 2020, this is in 2020, they established what's called the social credit system. This is crazy. Citizens are they will judge each other's behaviors. This is in place right now. They'll judge each other's behaviors and trustworthiness. So you'd lose privilege for jaywalking if your music was too loud, if you are late in your payments on something, and you lose these points, and eventually you get to a point where you're blacklisted. Well, what does that mean? Well, you can't buy a plane ticket, you can't do this, you can't do that until you've paid your fine and your dues. And it's supposed to be like, hey, let's keep each other accountable type of thing, but a little bit on the crazy side. We have glitches. We'll be all right. Look at this next one. The Chinese government, with all the CCTVs, they have 20 million public CCTVs, a surveillance network, and you know what they call it? Skynet. Some of you are laughing, and because it was on the Terminator series, the Skynet, with the bad robots. It's called Skynet, and they did an experiment. They could track with facial recognition and everything. They did an experiment with a journalist, and they tracked him down in 7 minutes. So you can take anybody in the millions of billions of people there and track them down. Oh, it's great for criminals, but when you want to find that Christian, that's what's happening. Scary stuff. My point is this: the tech is in place for a one world currency. The tech is in place for a one world government to control a people, and then an implementation, Revelation 13, of that mark of the beast, that no one can buy or sell without that mark. And we're seeing those pieces fall into place. Let me just say this. Before the mark comes the marker. You have to have the Antichrist in power before that mark of the beast comes. And I don't believe the Antichrist is in power right now. And the mark of the beast is not only financially connected, it's spiritually connected. They're pledging their allegiance to worship him who proclaimed himself now as God. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Comes in and desecrates the temple, proclaims himself as God, to be worshiped as God, and people follow. So just a side note. So let me go on. The persecution of Christians. We see in verse 20 the destruction of Jerusalem and lights that flicker on and off when it's the end times. I feel like I need to dance or something. Verse 20. But when you see Jerusalem, Jesus says, surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written might be fulfilled. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days, for there will be a great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles all fulfilled. So Jesus focuses in on Jerusalem and what's going on in the Jewish culture. Obviously everything that is kind of taking place within that. But we find Jerusalem was destroyed, AD 70, just about 40 years after Jesus says these things by a Roman military commander named Titus. We see Hitler coming against the Jews in the 1900s. But there is an incredible global rise of anti-Semitism taking place. France is up 74%. Germany is up 70%. Let me show you this picture here. Is an article of 2019, last year, reported the highest level of attacks in the United States since 1979 on Jewish people. The highest level. You don't think it's happening in our country? It is. But in the end, the Antichrist is going to come against the Jewish people, against Jerusalem, to destroy them. And you think, well, why of all people on the earth is the Antichrist and these people so bent against Jewish people? Come on, they're this small of a nation, and why of all people? Because I believe that Satan himself wants to destroy those in any covenant, any communication, any connection with God himself. He came to kill, steal, and destroy. That's his MO. And he targets those, not only the church, but the Jewish people and those people around there. Jerusalem is that epicenter of things, and we keep an eye on it. Look at verse 25 and 26. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heaven will be shaken. So we see these fearful expectation of what's to come. Let me show you a picture here of the Doomsday Clock. I brought this up last year when we talked about prophecy, but this is where it's at now. It's basically scientists come together and they put their brains together and try to figure out how close we are to the end of the world. And it depends on various things. In 2018, we were 2 minutes to midnight. Last year, it was still 2 minutes. Guess what happened last year? Now it's 100 seconds to midnight. Fearful. February 2020, YouGov survey found that 29% of U.S. adults think there would be an apocalyptic disaster in their lifetime. This is February. I bet that number's gone up by now. But as the world is falling apart in various ways, people are paralyzed by fear. Fear of what's up in the heavens happening. Fear of what's happening on the earth around them in their own lives. But the believer, we stand steady in Jesus Christ. We know he holds us safe and secure, right? It's important to have that. The last one, the seventh one, is that the nation of Israel would be reborn. Look at verse 29. Jesus gives this picture of a fig tree representing Israel. There it is. Verse 29. Then he spoke to them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they are already budding, you see and know for yourselves that summer is now near. So you also, when you see these things happening, know that the kingdom of God is near. Surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. The nation of Israel being reborn, like a fig tree that would be budding and blossom and bloom. And we read, you've seen this, but in 1948, May 14th, 1948, Israel became a nation in one day. You know, it was in the Jerusalem Post. The state of Israel was born in one day. But what's fascinating as you look at this verse, if you look at verse 32, it says the generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Generation could either mean a group of people or a time. If it applies to a group of people, the Jewish people, then how true it is. They will never pass away until Christ comes and reigns on the earth. What a great thing to know. He's going to have his hand upon the Jewish people. But if it refers to a time, then how long is a generation? People have often speculated, well, 1948, 40 years is a generation. And so in 1988, if you were around, you remember that 88 reasons why the raptures happened in 1988, and it made its rounds, and people made all these speculations and stuff of why it has to happen, and that came and went. But what if, for the sake of argument, what if a generation is not 40 years, but what if a generation is 80 years in God's timeline? 1948 plus 80 years brings us to 2028 before Jesus comes to rule and reign. But before Jesus comes to rule and reign, there's called the 7-year tribulation. So you back it up and it puts us at 2021. Is this the year that Jesus comes back to rapture his church away? Maranatha, amen. Wow, who knows? I'm just saying. No one knows the day or the hour, the Bible tells us. But we sure can know the seasons, and that's what we look around and we see. We see the seasons happening. We see the things taking place. And we are the wiser ones, in a sense, because we have the Spirit of God to say, Lord, I want my heart to be in the right place as I look at what's happening in my world around me. Keep your eye on Israel. God has rebirthed this nation. God is doing a work in Israel. All the while, they are continually attacked. They are fruitful, they are leading, and they are doing well. You see, God promised in the Word of God, he says, I'm going to bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. So it's always our benefit to be on the side of blessing Israel, right? Unfortunately, and I say this with unfortunately, is we find our current president, even from day one, has made some anti-Israel policies. You saw that he changed the Twitter handle for the U.S. ambassador to Israel to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. You think, well, what's the big deal? Well, the U.S. wouldn't get involved in policies, and now the U.S. is now standing ground to say there is a separation between Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. It's little things that erode. And by the way, Gaza is run by a terrorist organization called Hamas, right? Scary stuff. But little by little, the nation in trouble is not Israel, it's us. Scary times. But let me close with an exhortation, because I don't want you to walk away from here going, man, what a bummer. Here's my exhortation. In the face of what's happening, you don't have to fear, because God is still in control, and he's coming soon. I'm going to run through a couple scriptures, and these are ones that the Lord put upon my heart, just briefly, and then we'll close. Isaiah 8. Let it minister to your heart. This is what I read in my own devotions. Isaiah 8, verses 11 through 13. The Lord has given me a strong warning not to think like everyone else does. He said, don't call everything a conspiracy like they do, and don't live in a dread of what frightens them. Make the Lord of heaven's army holy in your life. He is the one you should fear. He is the one who should make you tremble. So guard your heart. Guard your heart from the media and everything else that's going on. Fear the Lord. Isaiah 7, verse 4. Tell him to stop worrying. Hey, maybe that's what you need to hear this morning. Stop worrying. He says, tell him he doesn't need to fear the fierce anger of those two burned out embers, King Rezin of Syria and Pekah, son of Remaliah. We don't have to fear what men are going to do. From God's perspective, they're just two burned out embers. You can take that to mean what you want. In Isaiah chapter 7, verse 9, look at what he says. Unless your faith is firm, I cannot make you stand firm. You see, for the believer, faith is what keeps our feet steady, keeps us from getting tripped up. So your focus needs, Lord, strengthen my faith for whatever's ahead. Whatever's ahead, strengthen my faith in you. I want you to be the focus, not the chaos of the world around me. And I want to pour into you. And I love out of Isaiah 41, verse 10. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. To be discouraged or dismayed is at a loss in how to deal with something. And that has described many people over 2020. At a loss. I have no idea how to deal with things. To be without courage. You know what, church? Don't give up. You keep looking up because your Redeemer is coming. And to encourage your heart, he says, I'm going to strengthen you to stand in the battle or through the trial. He says, I'm going to help you to minister effectively and not just shrink back in fear. And I'm going to uphold you with my righteous right hand to defend and protect and sustain you all the way until you go home. Because Jesus said, let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. And I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will doubtlessly come again to receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. My Father's house are many mansions, and I'm heading there. And I'm coming back for you. He's coming for us. And so the reality is, in looking at all these things as we close, is this: are you prepared to meet Jesus Christ? Is he your Lord and Savior, or are you just playing religion? Have you surrendered your heart to Jesus Christ? As you look at all the chaos happening in the world, you can have full assurance and a surety. No matter what happens, I know where I'm going. My home is in heaven, and my heart is with Jesus. Let's pray.